All right, I'm gonna pull up my, because Doug, I had a couple of questions actually for you about, we're gonna have a conversation this morning about servant leadership. And this came from, Joe, this came from a conversation we had on Monday. We were just kind of randomly talking about what people need in this time, and people who have been thrown into working from home, who've never had to work from home before, are kind of amongst a group of people who have worked from home, and the people who have worked from home are sort of like, eh, been doing this for a while. Like Elizabeth said to us this morning, yeah, this has been my life January to April forever. So as a CPA, so it's not a big deal to her. And so I think um, we can find some good conversation amongst people to help some of us kind of move through this whole, what does it mean to work from home? And it seems like it's going to be a lot longer than people thought. So
Yeah.
uh, so then the conversation came about where we were talking about different ways of thinking about leadership, and Doug was talking about being a servant leader, and we wanted to really dig into what that meant, particularly for our small business owners who are going to be calling, as you know, and wanting to know, how do I get out of this mess? How do I, survive, maintain, and grow? So that's kind of where we came from. And so
Okay.
Doug, this is Doug Holden, and I'm not going to like tell your story because I think you did a great job. I think you did a really beautiful way of talking about who you are. But
Darcella, you're really garbled again. I can't understand a word you're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
So-
think
Sorry.
audio.
huh?
I think we got a little background.
Okay, I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
All right.
Yeah, sorry.
I'll stay this way.
yes.
So now I have to look sideways. So Doug, I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself. This is Doug Holden, who has had over 35 years of working in business leadership. And I'm just going to leave it there and let you take off with it. And then you and I will just have some dialogue, and everyone else, please just jump in as you have a question.
Okay. Well, the subject that we're starting out with is servant leadership, and in preparing for what to talk about, I only came up with a couple of things that I wanted to kind of set the foundation with and kind of open the conversation, because it has more to do about what everyone else has to say in the position that they're in, as opposed to what you can, you can Google the internet, and the first thing that's going to come up is a description and who coined the word and where servant leadership came from, and a whole bunch of whatever. But the important part in this conversation is about what it means to each one of us, and how do we utilize that in our businesses, whether we're doing really good right now or we're struggling to figure out what's next. And in the book that Robert Greenlee wrote back in the 70s, he had an essay in there, and he was talking about servant leadership, and a lot of the industry says that he coined that term and that phrase and how that works. But I have to go back to a little older reference to that process, and it takes me all the way back to well, actually, I don't want to get Bible thumping here at all, but if you look in Matthew 20, Jesus actually showed up on the face of the earth first as a servant to lead. And his whole premises was to be a servant to the people, to the disciples, to anyone around him. So if you look far enough back, you find out that servant leadership is not new. It changes. Other people like to grab a hold of it and say, oh, well, I've come up with a new idea. I wrote a new book. I now have a coaching book, and look at all these phenomenal ideas. But I'm in no way going to ever take the credit from who started this first, other than to try to follow that. So for me right now, I talked to a couple of people yesterday on Zoom when we got Zoom working. And the big thing that came out in both of those conversations is kind of how are they going to change what their business was when what they do is a very connected, interactive type of platform. The only way that they make money is to be out in a group of people doing what they do. And now they're at home with no business, no activity, and it's like, how do I do this? And both of them, which really didn't surprise me right now, were really hesitant. They were dragging their feet. They were afraid to even talk to me, because the first thing that I did when I got them both on the phone separately is explain to them where I'm at and what I'm trying to do. And a lot of these concerns about reaching out for help went away as soon as I explained to them, okay, well, what I'm doing is I've pretty much dropped my fees. I have, I'm talking to people, trying to help them, trying to keep them staying connected, almost in a counselor type of position. So for me, that servant leadership is not about trying to sell. It's about trying to serve. Right now, it is more, how can I serve my community? How can I help people with ideas and directions and get them moving forward, instead of being overwhelmed and concerned about, I don't know what I do. This is the one thing I did, and now I can't do that one thing. So what do I do with it? For me, that servant leadership is not as much about leading as it's about being a part of our confusion, not adding more confusion to it, but letting people understand that most of us have really no idea what tomorrow is going to bring, and what's going to happen to our businesses, and how we structure them, what we have to do going forward. And what I find is interesting about where we're at right now, when you kind of look at what's happening across the country, and we do a lot of business in Canada, so we're able to look at that environment as well, is that the diversity of what our businesses are becoming really broad. We have people who cannot hire enough people and don't know what to do with the cash that's coming in. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have people who are kind of wondering how they're going to afford to buy the gallon of milk or the toilet paper when they can find it.
Right.
So the people in the middle, that space is getting bigger every day. And how do we keep that gap closer together, so that we don't lose people in this entrepreneurial small business environment? The whole reason I got into this business, or this line of work, is because I was seeing people start businesses that they had phenomenal ideas, had a tremendous amount of energy. They were so excited about what they were doing. And then you talk to them 2 years later and they're like, well, I'm not doing that anymore. And it's like, well, why not?
Yeah.
Wasn't quite what I thought. I didn't make any money. I'm getting pressure from home. I finally just had to go get a job. And it's like, well, how do I help these people with this process of, even though you might need to go work for someone else, keep that dream alive, keep pushing it. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a year. Sometimes it might not happen for 2 or 3 years, depending on what you're doing. Right now, this environment is really taking a lot of those people to task on what their idea was and how much faith they have in what their business plan was. So for me, the whole concept of servant leadership is stepping into this environment and saying, have you thought about doing this? Maybe you could take the skills and implement it into this kind of direction. And I won't mention any names, and I won't talk out of turn here, but one of the people that I was talking to yesterday runs a audiovisual lighting company, and his whole business parameter, his whole process is about going to parties, going to events, setting up the audiovisual and setting up the lighting, and having this phenomenal event. And now he's doing nothing. And he's like, well, I want to talk, but I don't want to talk because I'm afraid you're going to start running the clock and I can't afford to pay you. And I said, we're not charging anyone anything here. What I want to do is help you understand how can you take your skills and your hardware and do something with it. And this idea actually came up because we were on this meeting Monday, which is what this group is all about, is talking about ideas and how can each other use them, is the idea of taking the equipment that he has and how can he rent that or lease that out. And it was a conversation that came up Monday with another one of our phenomenal coaches that was on this call about what she did with a client and helping him. And I said, well, can you take your lighting equipment and help people build a better visual effect when they're on these Zoom calls? Can you become a Zoom call lighting expert in your community And
Right.
can you take the equipment you have and rent it out to these people so that they don't look like this? Drop my light. So, it is about how to use the tools and the skills that we have
Yeah.
that we might not be, we might not understand how to do that. So for me, servant leadership is more about serving the people around us and helping them grow and capitalize on what they already have.
So, so I wanted to jump in there real quick because you're so right. One of the things that we do when we're talking to our clients in a lot of these trainings is we spend a lot of time on the why of it and the passion and all that kind of stuff. Because I truly do believe the same, what you're saying is that if you don't really understand that piece of it, then you can have the best business in the whole wide world and not make any money, right? Because you hate your job or you don't like your clients or everything's a problem instead of being the place where you're looking to help other people. We tell our clients that all the time in these trainings, these military folks, I know this sounds crazy, but if you do what you do it well, and you do it from a position of help, money will come, right? It's a hard concept for us to understand for some reason. Kind of in your experience, what do you see as the hardest thing for your clients to grasp about that concept? Like, where do you think that comes from?
Well, taking it kind of from your I guess, primary clientele base, working with a person who had come out of the military and had a security background, digital security, and decided that they were going to create a security company. And actually, they never became a client of mine. They became chatting at Starbucks 2 or 3 times in the morning to help him understand basically where his strengths and his weaknesses are. And not to sound like a project manager, but if you don't list that out, you don't really know what you're good at. And the important part for anyone wanting to be in a small business, at some point you have to list out and define the things that, honestly, you really kind of suck at. And how do you get through those? So you can have, like you mentioned, you can have the best business platform, you can have the best business idea and can implement that whole concept really well. But if people don't know you're there, or they don't like to work with you, or they're afraid that you're just full of it, you're not going to get that. You're not going to move forward. You're not going to have that business. You're not going to have that genuine authenticity that you need. So in dealing with him, what we ended up doing is spending more time, more in a counselor viewpoint, about how do you tone down your enthusiasm and your verbiage and some of the language you use, and get your head out of, and I want to say this the right way because there's a lot of military people out there, but how do you get your head out of the military slam it home approach and tone it down so that clients who need your services can listen to what you do, and it's not diminished by how you're delivering it and the language you use, and in some cases the words you use. Right. So that I think that's a big point, especially when we're trying to figure out how to get people to do business with us over this type of medium. Is you have to be, I've got this much space for you to see me, so my words are going to sell you. It's not the body posture anymore. It's now very much about how you approach what you're doing.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Like the flash, the hands. I completely agree. Let me ask you a question. So many of us here on this call right now are consultants of some sort. You have CPA Elizabeth down there. You have Joe Eckert, who is with the SBA. So even though officially that's not her title, we are consulting in some way when we're talking to folks. I think that as consultants, we're going to need to find some more creative solutions for helping people so that they come through this COVID-19 and either one, don't fall right back into the same, kind of, oh, whew, glad that was done, and then moving forward. So how can we as consultants be more creative in helping people to really stick to that as we move through this problem?
Well, we're learning. And I think what's important as we move forward through this and we learn something that either doesn't work or works for us, that we get into this kind of environment and say, this worked, and this is what the scenario was, and this is how I approached it. And this didn't because, and we don't need to talk about our clients in names. We don't need to talk about the situations, but if we're not being transparent and open as coaches or business partners or growth people, then the people that we're working with, they're going to see right through that. And I think the important part is as we're growing through this situation is that we don't forget what we did. Just like you said, what happens, a month from now when we can all look back at this and go, whew, dodged a bullet there. But how do we prepare for that? And you're asking me that question, and I am constantly asking that question of myself and of the groups, especially when we get together like this, because we have a broad spectrum of viewpoints. And I think it's important to be able to honestly listen to the other people who are talking and help them honestly speak and not have this, well, I wrote this book and I'm an author and I got the answers. And it's like, this is not happening right now. We're
Right.
all learning this. So how can we help each other stay transparent and honest to the point to where we all grow? Which is why I bring this back to, it's more of a servant leadership instead of, well, these are my clients, leave them alone. It's like, no, maybe I need to bring my clients together with 2 or 3 other coaches, and I have to share them in order for me to be better as a coach, for me to be better as a business person, to help them, and in the same time, help the other people who are trying to help people grow as well. Why can't we all be better at the same time?
That is so interesting that you say that. So Jo will know this because she's a part of a lot of the trainings that we do. We tell our clients to create a bail team. So, and we talk a lot about team. Every time we're talking to them, we talk about how they should go gather a team to help them build. And I find it fascinating that once people get in business, they suddenly forget the teamwork motto. And then they go to, so I'm just now the person doing this, rather than, no, you are one member of a team to help someone else build. So I think that's perfect. Oh my goodness, I couldn't have scripted that conversation there. We're gonna use that for our next training.
Yeah.
So feel free, anyone else, to jump in and ask questions. I have tons of questions about this stuff because it's fascinating me. I read a book called The Go-Giver, which is based a lot on what you talked about at the very beginning. This particular book is based a lot in faith. And I do think a lot of people are reaching back to some of their own faith values at this particular time, wherever they're coming from. But I really love this book, The Go-Giver, because it talked specifically about leading from a servant leadership role of helping a customer, giving out rather than saying, okay, I've given you something, now you give me back. It really was no, I'm giving you something. If it comes back, great. And it might come back differently than what I thought. And the whole premise of the book is if you push out and you give out, the stuff that comes back to you will be actually what you need, not what you think you need. So it just kind of falls in line to kind of what you've talked about there. I thought, I was like, and I just finished it on my audiobook, and I was like, whoa, that's kind of
I mean,
just the universe, right? That's pretty awesome. I had another question for you, but I don't want to monopolize the time. Does anybody else have a question? Because I'm all about learning this information.
Doug, this is Jo. I was just wondering, do you know about the SCORE organization and all of the resource partners that the SBA has around the country?
Yes, actually, a good friend of ours is one of the mentors at SCORE here in St. Louis Market. And we've chatted several times about how SCORE operates and what their approach is. I think it's another one of those environments where you're gathering a wide range of specific skill sets that when they all come together, it creates a very dynamic environment. And I've seen really amazing changes in people after they have worked with some of the coaches out of the SCORE group, because it has that philosophy that we have resources that we've gathered together, and I've gone as far as I can go with you, and I have to be, now this is from the SCORE coaching viewpoint, is that I have to be honest enough with myself to say, I can't help you grow to the next level. So I'm going to hand you off to, and they'll help you grow to the next level. And at some point that person will top out, because it's all about those expertise that are coming from different parts of the industry, the markets, age. I think one of the things that I like about SCORE, but I also would like to see more in, is the number of older professionals who are hibernating at home, who have an enormous amount of skill set that we should all be able to get from them. And we don't spend, I have three older business people, they're retired, that have just an amazing amount of international business and marketing. And I'm constantly talking to them just about stuff, and to listen to how they project, how they talk about what they've done, the people they've met, how they handled it. You can't put that in a book, and you can't get that out of a book. You can only get that by working with our older, seasoned people, and we're not pulling on them hard enough. There are a lot of them who are sitting at home watching reruns of I Love Lucy, and they have a whole business plan in their head that would help numerous business owners get out of a hole. And how do we do that? How do we draw those people into this more than what, I see that we're doing it, but we're doing it very small. How do we do more of that?
Yeah. Well,
I think one of the things is getting the word out. For those of you that are on the call that don't know what SCORE is, it's the same as what Darcella does too. We have our Veterans Business Outreach Center as a resource partner. SCORE are mentors that are either still in business or who have retired that volunteer their time to counsel and mentor clients. It's confidential, and I like to look at SCORE as having a whole board of directors for free through your entire life cycle. And you can use Darcella's group, you can use SCORE, you can use the Small Business Development Centers. They are located throughout the country also to help with your business, and the Women's Business Center. So there's a lot of free resources out there that people can go to, and I totally agree. We've got counselors from the age of close to 90 all the way down into their 30s, and they all bring something different to the game. So just trying to get the word out and let people know that this stuff is out there. There are federal tax dollars who have already paid for it. And Darcella, I'm not going to speak for you, but she is a rock star, and her and her team can help you with anything that you need.
I pay Joe really well for that. So thank you. So I really, really love the fact that, yes, the whole point of this too was the fact that we wanted to let people know that there are these resources out there. They don't need to be out there on their own in the island of me, doing the whole, oh, woe is me, I have to do everything, mantra that we heard a lot. But I had a question that I actually wanted to direct to Elizabeth about this servant leadership, which I think is interesting. So many people don't think it's as, kind of soft and cuddly and warm, right? They think CPAs are just going to make you stick to the rules, and they're just mean people, and they won't let me have fun, right? That's what I get from a lot of clients. But I saw the best commercial ever, which was this guy kind of constantly talking to his client. It was a car commercial. No, you can't do that. Oh my God, you can't write that off. It's not, that commercial
Mhm.
is going on. And finally the guy buys a car and he's like, yes, that's awesome. But what I really thought that spoke to was how much coaching a CPA actually to a small business owner, right? And it is soft skills. It is, you know, it is a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about, from your perspective as a CPA, kind of what Doug was talking about, being sort of like at that point where you are finding yourself being more of this servant leader rather than a here's the rule and hard and fast?
Boy, I have a lot of thoughts about this. First of all, I so appreciate SCORE because I can't give away the kind of help that SCORE gives to somebody who's in the midst of trying to develop an idea for a small business or just trying to get it off the ground. Because it's, well, I mean, it's not the core of my business. And I have to admit, I'm not going to be able to do justice to what this person needs to be successful or to figure out what exactly should I do with this passion or this desire that's within me, or even just to make a living and to be able to support myself and my family. So thank you. And I'm very appreciative of the way that you guys are presenting what you offer, that you're part of a team and thinking of SCORE as a board of directors. I definitely focus on servant leadership more when I'm thinking about my firm than I do when I'm thinking about my clients' businesses. Because for me, I'm a worker and my concept in the natural is to think of servant leadership as working harder than anybody else. Okay. But I've come to see that that's not necessarily what servant leadership is. Servant leadership is helping others become what you can see as their leader is in them before they're actually maybe wanting that, they are desiring it, or they in any way see that in themselves. And sometimes that means doing a little less and expecting a little more of the people that are around. When I was listening to Doug, I was thinking about two things that are present in Doug that he's trying to convey others must see, and that is a growth mindset. Instead of having this scarcity mindset that there just isn't enough business and I need to hold on for dear life to what I got, having a growth mindset and thinking there is plenty of business and maybe some of this business isn't the right business for me. And if I'm doing it, I can't do the things that are going to come my way that are right, is one of the reasons people need coaches often, is because we get stuck in our own thinking and we can't step outside. Okay. So now to talk about what I give my clients in the soft skill set of things. Some of my very, very best clients are super, super strong CEOs. These people are in charge. They are not going to take well to someone telling them, no, you can't do this. They want to hear, what happens if I do this? Why are you telling me not to do this? And what else can I do? And so my communication style and my soft skills are basically situating myself under them as a part of their team and not over them and telling them what to do. That's servant leadership. It is being willing to patiently spend the time until I can tell that they are getting it, and listening for those key cookie crumbs, if you will, that they're realizing, wait a minute, she's giving me some guidelines into the way of thinking, but she's not giving me the answers. She's asking me to search for these answers for myself. Whether it's revenue generation or cost cutting or hiring decisions, firing decisions, there's so much that's going on right now. And while we're in the midst of tax season, are focusing primarily on trying to get people refunds that have them coming, or giving them a balance due in July that they can work towards now. We are being asked to help make those decisions, help our owners make those decisions about what to do about their employees. Those are hard things. All of this is soft skills. Certainly, I could call myself a tax coach. I could call myself a business coach. But I'm proud of being a CPA. So I want to hang on to who I am and what I've worked so hard to develop and grow. And when people interview CPAs, and I'm one of those that they interview, I say to them, listen, I have all the respect in the world for the other people that are in my profession, but I'm me. And what you're hearing from me is going to be a reflection of the way I made. And so for some people, that's not going to work because I'm passionate, I'm on. And when I'm communicating, that's how I'm communicating. And they're like freaking out by that. They want that calm, kind of even keeled person. Well, that's not me. They need to shop till they find that person. But they know, my clients know I care about them. I think that, have I answered?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. Hey, Tom, I just want to let you know we see you. We're just having a really good conversation here about servant leadership and such that Doug was leading us through. And Elizabeth was kind of giving her point from a CPA perspective as a servant leadership. So Tom, you want to just say hi and tell us who you are?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Tom Bragg. I am a retired Air Force chief and living in Iowa City, Iowa, doing my second post-retirement job working as a trading officer in a bank.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the coffee house.
Well, thank you. And I don't have video without stringing a bunch of wires and just not practical this morning.
Oh, nope, no worries. Hey, so Doug, I wanted to ask you this other question because, okay, so I'm all about the soft skills. I'm all about this servant leadership. This was a huge button for me. And I'm also all about the dollars, like bringing in the money, making sure you're making money. Because one of the things we tell people all the time is this is awesome that you have this beautiful belief in what you want to do in the world. You need to make money in order for you to be able to get back to church or get back to the community or whatever it is that you're trying to get back to. Tell me, when do you think, or is there a moment where in your servant leadership where you do switch to sales? Like, you know, how does that work? When is it? Because a lot of people hear this and they're like, oh God, she's talking fluffy again, So, kind of lead us through that. Like, when is it when you switch over? Is there a magic switch over line? Or is it just something you learn?
Well, I think there's a lot of components to it, and it has to do a lot with the type of business you're in. I've known Elizabeth for a long time, and something I want to add to what she was saying as I try to answer that is that there's a business side to being able to lead in a servant mindset, but there's also a personal side. There's a soft side that has to be there. Otherwise, you can't genuinely serve someone unless they're willing to be served. You have to be able to step out of a mindset and say, okay, well, I'm willing to be served. I don't have the answers, and I'm willing for you to help me discover those. Elizabeth is very good at helping people discover what the answer is for them, because from my viewpoint, her expertise isn't about coming up with the answer. It's about getting your brain moving so that you have the answer. For me, in this whole approach, which I'll use a story that I know from Elizabeth, is that she used to live down the street from me years ago, and she was doing her CPA business in the house, and she had this big picture window in the front. And my wife and I would walk by in the evenings for a walk, and we'd see her in there just working away and hair all over. And it's like, well, we don't want to go interrupt her. But she would see us, and she would stop what she's doing and come out of the house and say, oh, hi, guys, and have a hug. To me, that's the soft side of servant leadership that turns into business, because you begin to trust people. And when you trust them, coaching has a lot to do with finding a personality that you're willing to work with and willing to be open to. When it turns into income is when the other person feels confident enough or comfortable enough to look to you as not an expert in what you do, but is in a business or a personal companion to say, I'm thinking about, and it's like, well, gosh, I do that. How about if we create a relationship and make this official? And then money starts to happen. But if you're about selling first, and it goes back to how we started this, if you're about selling first, then you're always going to be looking at, okay, well, I met with this person twice and no money. Okay, gone, never talking to them again. Next, no money, you're gone. Next. But if you turn that the other way and you look at the bigger picture and say, maybe my income doesn't come from Bill. Maybe Bill knows Jenny and Jenny becomes my client, and that's where the income comes from. You have to keep your head at a bigger picture if you're going to be a servant leader. You can't concentrate and really drill down on that one person's interaction and say, that never came together, so forget that. I'm going back to internet marketing. It's all going to be internet marketing. Well, then you've just become like a million others. Differentiate yourself by keeping your mindset into serving, and the return will happen. It doesn't have to be cash that you return to be successful in what you're doing. So make sure you understand what success means to you and how you do this, because success is not how much money is in your bank account. And we need to help people who start businesses who need cash flow to understand that your success in your business is not the bottom line in your checking account. You got to think farther ahead than that.
I completely agree. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so before we move into our second part of this conversation, to allow everyone who's been on here before to have their coffee mug selfie, and then Tom, we can't see you, but we'll feel like you're holding up your coffee mug in spirit. And so I want everyone to grab their mug, and I'm going to do a quick photo shot here of everyone. All right. So I'll do 1, 2, 3. I love the dog. I love it. All right, 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Great shot, everybody. And I will share that out with Evan, who will get it out for everyone. So
I was excited about the pop. I'm sorry.
I know the little dog's like, I want to be in this shot. And actually, the funny part of living is my mug for today is keep calm.
Yes. And hug your dog. He's getting hugs. I gotta go, you guys. I'm so sorry. Thank you for inviting me, Doug. All the best. Maybe I'll join again, but I have to go. Thank you.
All right, have a good day.
Bye-bye. You too. Bye.
Thanks for coming.
So how this works for everyone who's on the line and Joe is it really is just kind of open dialogue, and you know, you pop in and pop out if you need to step out and do some work. I'll be here until about 9 a.m., a little bit past, and then we'll shut the coffee house doors so that everybody can work. But I'm going to step out and grab some coffee too. The doors will still be open because Evan is the co-host, so she'll make sure everything is good. But I wanted to have this conversation. Okay, so as well, I'm pretty, like I said, I'm pretty soft skills kind of person. I really believe in a servant leadership role. But I was in the Army for a long time. I went in the Army at 17, and I also had a pretty militant mom. So when I went into the military, I could already do hospital corners and bounce a quarter off of a cot. Like my mom was all about that. And she wasn't in the military. That's just the way she was. However, there are times when it gets a little much for me and I have to kind of step out and take a break. And I'll tell you when I know I'm getting a little like super type A. I was talking to a bunch of people on Zoom the other day, and they were talking about, oh, I'm staying at home from working and I'm getting all these projects done in my house. And I was like, shouldn't you be working? Being at home doesn't mean you suddenly get to paint the house, right? So anyway, when I come back, I'd love to have a conversation more about, like, for those of us who are in a leadership role and who now have teams who are kind of scattered. My teams are scattered. I mean, they're everywhere. So how do we continue to be a servant leader, but still get work done, right? So I'm gonna go run and grab some coffee and I'll be right back.
Okay.
And Evan will be here to let anybody else in who pops by.
What does bounce a quarter off of a cot mean? It does. I'm gonna Google it.
Well, it has to do with how perfect you have made your bed when you get up in the morning.
Oh,
And the
okay.
sheets are all tucked down and everything is tied in, so it's just perfect and nice and tight and not a wrinkle. And if they take a quarter, you should be able to bounce a quarter off from the sheets. That means that they're perfect.
I
So,
see.
yeah.
I definitely don't have
Doug,
that.
If I ever want to be that perfect.
What's that?
I said, I don't know if I ever want to be that perfect. I am
Yeah.
extremely organized, and it drives some people crazy, the level of information that I seek. And it's not, I don't think it's not just to be in the know, but it's to understand what's going on around me. And people also need encouragement with the servant leadership. It's encouraging someone to do something that they think they know how to do, or they might, but they're on the fence. Sometimes just encouragement, and believing in other people is key to a number of individuals.
Sure. And to kind of add to that, it's about helping people understand that someone believes in them. And it's always this two-way thing, because if your mindset is serving and the other person's mindset is serving, then you start out serving each other and you get a benefit because you've been served. And you have to help people understand that we believe in them so that they can believe in us. If you don't give first, it's really difficult to get someone else to give. So it is a life, it's a lifelong learning process. I'm big into stories. I'm a storyteller, and I had a phenomenal example of servant leadership a couple weeks ago. My kids, I have a 16-year-old and an 11-year-old, and they started shortly after Christmas figuring out what we were going to do for spring break. It's their responsibility to figure out what we're going to do for the week off. So they decided we're going to Florida. We picked Pensacola. They found a Airbnb. They had this whole schedule of all the things they wanted to go do. They wanted to go to the Air Force museum that's down there in Pensacola and see the fighter planes. They wanted to, all this stuff. And then 2 weeks before we were going to go, this whole thing happened and stuff started becoming, I don't know. By the time we got to Thursday, everything but one item was already closed. And it's like, so what do you guys want to do? And they're like, well, it's going to be boring to go down there and sit in a cabin and stare at each other. We might as well do that at home. So I said, okay, well, you guys think of what you want to do. And out of the blue, both of them said, why don't we go to Michigan and see grandma? Let's help her, because my mother is 86 years old. And I'm like, is that what you really want to do? And they're like, yeah, we haven't seen grandma in months. Let's go. So we packed up everything and we went to Michigan on a Sunday to help her out for 3 days. And that's what they did, is they made cookies with her. They helped her clean up her house. They did, all the stuff that they were doing. And that was their idea, not necessarily ours. So if the kids can be working in a servant mindset and not understand that that's what they're doing, how do we help our other people, our adults who may not see that way? How do we help them just naturally slide into that mindset, and it becomes natural? Then you carry that into your business, and then it's not forced. It's honest.
No, that's absolutely correct. I guess that's all right. So my existential question is like, when does it turn over for us as adults? Like, at what point in time, if we're all kind of, many of us, not all, so many of us are raised in this giving, kindergarten, you help your neighbor, you do like all those things that we learn growing up about how we function as human beings. Like, what happens in business that stops becoming a thing? Like, is there a, what happens? I'm sure it's different for everyone, but, so I guess the question is really isn't what happens, but how do we help them get that back?
Yeah.
What are some of your suggestions for, is it books to read? Is it people to be around? Is it, what is it? Is it a combination of?
Gosh, that's a
Huge question.
that is a huge question.
We're solving the problems of the universe on this Zoom call.
Yeah.
And Tom,
Um,
please feel free to jump in too.
Just nature versus nurture right here. Like, what's good?
mhm. Well, I'm a lifelong learner, and I went back to college a few years ago and added another BS to all of my BS. And being an older student in the college environment, because in our area here, as you guys know who are in the St. Louis market, Lindenwood out in St. Charles a few years ago was really driving to bring people in, and they were grabbing people from everywhere trying to build that university platform. So as I went through school there, the one thing that I noticed as an older student is that it is very much about get your degree, get a job, and be successful. And when about halfway through that, I started chatting with some of my co-students, and it's like, yeah, but don't forget that you still have to be human. You still have to be a person. You are put here on this planet with a gift, and your gift changes through seasons of your life. You'll see what your gift is when you're 20, and don't be surprised if your gift is different when you're 30 and when it's 40. So if you're not being aware of that, and one of the classes that I teach is a gift class about discovering your gift. And I have people go through that class and they go, yeah, I did this about 10 years ago. I understand. And then they go through it again and they're like, oh my gosh, my gift changed. It's like, no, you've just been made aware of additional skills and gifts that you have. And now how do you use them? But that's not what we're about. We're about get your degree, get a job, and be successful. And it's like, we need to keep that softer. Now, how do you do that? I don't know, but our college students need really good, open, honest mentors in their lives, and not just books, 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 books.
I always say that. I think that well, I wouldn't say super recently, but recently graduated college, like I feel like it was more of a push to like get your degree, do this, and now go get a job. And it was, I think a lot of people my age are kind of in the, okay, well now we have our degrees and I don't know if this is necessarily what I wanted to do. It's just what I got my degree in,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to ask, have we put, and this goes back easily 15, 20 years, have we as a society put too much emphasis on you've got to have a degree when the job market hasn't necessarily kept up with providing jobs that are, a degree is truly required for that job? And I can give you a really great example. I live in Iowa City, home of University of Iowa. And during my job search 3 years ago, every job, no matter what it was, no matter what it was to do or what company, at almost every single one of them said bachelor's degree required or highly desired. And now some of those positions were to be a shift manager at a retail clothing store in the mall. And I'm thinking, as I'm looking back on my career before I retired, I say, why do I need a bachelor's degree to be able to manage a shift at a retail clothing store in the mall? And part of it is, and I think it kind of speaks to what Evan was mentioning, is that do we have to create jobs that require a degree just to validate people that felt they or were pushed to have to get a degree? Or is that really a position that requires the 4 years of higher education that nets a person a degree? And I'm curious about your thoughts on this, and if anybody else sees this in other cities that maybe aren't necessarily a college town.
Yeah, definitely. Like my friends and I, we were actually just talking about this. We get a lot of, having recently been in the job market, like a lot of the jobs are entry level, higher levels of degree required, and then it's like, but you know, the entry level for this degree is not that, it doesn't equal out, you know. You're pushing people towards things that don't necessarily require like a high level degree, but in order to even get to the beginning of that stage, they need a higher level degree. But I do think that we should, in general, like as a society, put more emphasis on softer skills, like people skills, like leadership and, you know, service versus strictly like education. I do think education is important, don't get me wrong. But it shouldn't, I think we maybe put a little bit too much emphasis on like having that piece of paper that says, you know, I have this degree, but what do I do with that? You know?
I think you're spot on, Evan. And it's a context thing, but I will say lifelong learning is always important. I don't know that education ending up with a piece of paper makes you a better learner, makes you a better human, makes you a better leader, makes you a better servant. I think we put the emphasis somehow on the paper and not, do you have a mindset of lifelong learning, which is, I would love to have people working for me that have that mindset, because that's going to be a great relationship for mentoring, for mutual growth and mutual respect. So I know it's a slight turn on the words, but I think that's exactly kind of where society has gone, is the emphasis has come to getting that paper. And then, like you mentioned, some of those entry-level jobs that require a bachelor's, well, we're going to start you at minimum wage. Okay, how do I work my way out of my college debt? In an entry-level position, you're requiring a 4-year degree, and you're going to pay me $8, $10, $12, $15 an hour, depending on what community you're living in. Those two are not compatible, I don't think.
Oh, Tom, you are, I mean, I'm glad we recorded that, because I got to tell you, as a person who hires, that is absolutely, I mean, I love the education. I need you to have technical skills. That is all extremely important. I mean, I'm going for my doctorate, so education is I'm all about it. However, you're absolutely right. Trying to find someone who has that servant leadership mindset, who wants to, even if they don't, who's willing to learn differently, is such a challenge, especially trying to hire people. In what we do as the VBOC, it is a challenge. Everybody thinks our job is super sexy. Like, oh, it's so to run out and talk to people and educate them and go on these posts. And I'm like, it is. And then there's travel and sitting in your car for 9 hours and getting on a plane and
people who don't show up for appointments.
don't show up and answering the same question over and over again for 14 years. I mean, there is a lot of other stuff that's not super sexy about it, but I will tell you that if you do come at it from a mindset that's here to help you, then those questions don't bother you. I mean, I couldn't have done this for 14 years if I didn't have that way of thinking, and trying to find people who have that way of thinking is so important, which is why I love this conversation that when Doug brought it up on Monday, I was like, yes, that'll be our kickoff virtual coffee house conversation.
And go ahead, Tom.
I just say, I've because of where I work, we have every conceivable generation that I work with here at the bank. And it's really opened my eyes a lot to part of what you mentioned, Darcella, is, we want to bring people in that have that mindset, but if they haven't grown up with it, and a couple of you at least mentioned this earlier, how do we instill that? And I think a big part of that is we have to accept that the generation that's entering the workforce now may or may not have grown up with those mentors throughout their formative years, for lack of a better word. But we can start the day we hire them, or even before, when we're doing job coaching and mentoring out in the communities. We can create that trusting relationship that Doug mentioned. Man, that is critical to be able to influence anybody. There has to be a foundation of trust first. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, there will always be resistance. But that happens every single new employee that comes through the door. We can assume that we've hired them because they're going to be a fit with the company and our values. We can teach the technical skills, and the way we interact and build that trust from their very first interaction, submitting the job application and acknowledging that. We can start to build that relationship of trust right at that moment, and just show and tell. That's how even adults still learn that way, just the same as we did in kindergarten. So I don't look at it as a lost cause. I look at it as there's where our soft skills and our servant leadership really comes to be valuable. And the term I used, especially in the military, and I learned this from one of my chaplains. He said, my goal as a chaplain is to meet you at your point of need. And to me, that really captured what servant leadership is all about. It's not about me. If I'm going to help you, I need to meet you at where you are, what you need right now.
Right.
Even if that's just to say, let me help you open your eyes and see what's the big picture, what's the root, what is really going on. That in itself is servant leadership, because it's focused on the person that you're mentoring or leading or influencing.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback on Tom's approach here, because it is extremely important for our employers as well. And I say this because back in 2014, after I successfully made it through the whole project management degree testing documentation BS, and I interviewed with a very large seed company in the St. Louis area. And in that interview, there were 4 or 5 people sitting there, and they were looking for a international project manager to, I forget even what it was now. And they were asking me all of my background in project management, and we were going through it, and they're kind of like, I could already sense that I wasn't going to be the candidate. So they get to the point to where, okay, well, do you have any questions for us? And it's interesting how Tom phrased this, is that one of the questions I asked him is, why are you looking for somebody with a project management certification and a project management degree? And very easily, they all, without even hesitation, said, because we're not going to take the time to train the person. We want you to hit the ground making money for us now. And I'm like, you can't do that. I'm sorry, that doesn't happen. Somehow you've got to spend some kind of time with me to define the environment, the political landscape, the business concept. You have to invest in me before I can be of value to you. And they were adamant that if they got a degreed person with this degree, that they were golden, and it's done. And we got to help our employers understand in today's world that this terminology of hit the ground running is not possible. You have to invest in people. And if you don't do that either with skills, knowledge, or emotion, you're not going to get the people you really want. And we have to help our employers understand that this isn't all on the students graduating from college, because they're really kind of like the pawn in the process. How do we help the kings and the bishops understand that you can't play with these pawns? You have to help them.
Absolutely. And I think going off of what you said, I mean, when companies do like stuff like that, because I've worked in a couple companies, and like I had the, qualifications they were looking for. I knew what I was doing as soon as I went in. But then I went in, I didn't feel any sort of connection at all to the company. I was just like, well, I'm just here to do my job. And it's very easy for employees to leave if they're like, don't feel like there's any sort of, like, the company doesn't care,
Yep.
So it's definitely a mutually beneficial relationship too. I mean, not that you should be thinking, I'm going to help this person so they can help me, but you're thinking, I'm going to help this person because I want them to feel involved in our company.
Right. I have to bring you in. If I don't bring you in, how can you ever truly help me? Now you're just an employee.
Yeah.
Well, and I think those two aren't mutually exclusive. And that's what I find fascinating, is that people say you're either this or that. And I think we've done a pretty good job of blending them. At least I can say I'm trying to do that as a leader in the organization. So, for example, we had a remote work from home policy already created, and it was ready to go. It was insurance improved, the insurance company was happy with it, was all good. So when this happened, I didn't have to scramble to kind of find a remote policy. We already had one. So we executed it. And then I was able, because I already had a standard, to be flexible. with our particular staff. So some staff members have children, and so they needed a little more flexibility than other staff members who had older children, and they didn't need the same amount of flexibility. And so for me, when I look at servant leadership, for me, the rules are not there necessarily to just be hard and fast rules all the time. I mean, there's some things that are just hard and fast, but they're there for me as a leader to be able to move through that construct and help people as they need it, that still gets our business done. So I'm hoping that's what I'm doing, right? That's my goal. And because on the other side of it, I also think having rules does help people not be out there just in vague land trying to hope they're figuring it out themselves. At least that's from my perspective.
Yeah. Well, you know, we got military people here, and I'm sure there's a lot of military people and ex-military people who are listening to us. But, you know, my brother was in the Air Force for a long time, and he became one of the, I think he was sergeant in aircraft maintenance, something or other in Arizona. And we talked at one point about going to boot camp. And his viewpoint, I thought, was very unique when I talked to other people who go through boot camp. And they're like, you go to boot camp and they beat the crap out of you, and if you survive, you're in. And his viewpoint was, well, you go to boot camp so that you become a part of the synergy. You become part of what the Air Force is trying to do. As a team, we're trying to get people in the air to protect our country and get them home safe. That's our goal. And if you don't go through boot camp and you can't meet those criteria to do that job, he says, boot camp isn't about beating you up. Boot camp is about getting you to understand what we're trying to do. And it's not about conformity, which is my input into this. It's about consistency. And that's investing. How many billions of dollars are spent constantly in our military environment in this country to help new people become a part of that team? That's what boot camp is for. We invest in these people coming in so that when they come out on the other end, they can put value into it. But you still have to get them into whatever area you're working with and help them understand how to do the job they need to do. Just because they have this level of ability, that level of ability isn't going to fly a plane. You need to help them, you know, I mean, this is Tom's subject, not mine. You have to help them be better, or you don't ever get better. That's a massive investment in time and energy and emotional support.
Hey, Tom, just so you know, I'm Army veteran. So when Doug was making that description of Air Force veterans, I was like, yeah, that's kind of about how they run. So, so I was like, yeah, he's sergeant of something that's doing some things. I was like, yeah.
No, Darcella, we had to bounce a quarter off the bed sheets too.
That's what this is what I really love about what I do, is the fact that I can be around so many other military personnel and military families at different levels, different branches. We can, you know, shoot the breeze, we can make fun of each other, we can have like this really great camaraderie. And at the end of the day, that moves us into a different space and a different relationship that does allow us to think more in that servant leadership mindset, and to allow us to help pull some of those skill sets from the military that really are there that people don't necessarily think of. I think, Doug, you hit it on the head when you say people think of boot camp as, we're going to tear you down and make you this, you know, beast. And there are some piece of it that's like that. But I think your description of it is absolutely the best. Was it your brother-in-law who said that?
My brother, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really more along the lines of what it is. That doesn't sell though really well on a brochure.
Well, that's Evan's task, is to sell that, not ours.
Although I will say I'm the be all you can be Army, so that's kind of where that was, you know, that whole, you know, be all you can be kind of mantra. So.
Yeah.
Doug, I know you have to leave us here shortly. Are there any like parting words, books to read, things you think that we can do to be better in our servant leadership space as we're moving through this?
You know, I'm a big home Bible study church group kind of person. So a lot of my approach comes from a biblical approach. That's how I run my coaching business, is that we need to understand what our gift is, what we're supposed to be doing, and don't be afraid if you discover it's changed. Embrace it and figure out how to use it. But a lot of my coaching approach to things is not really coming from the business coaching industry. I coach basketball for the Y here locally, and I have a bunch of kids running around me. It's about giving to those kids and helping them understand how to be in a team, in a group, and to work together. It's not about winning games, because we don't usually win games. But a lot of my background and what I do comes from, is this backwards or forwards? I think it's backwards. It comes from sports coaching knowledge. And one of the books that I like is The Captain Class. And this is about how to create great sports teams. But if you read through this, a lot of it is based about how do you create great social teams. And the way we are right now, especially with this virus thing throwing us all in a tailspin, we need community now more than we ever have. People don't talk to each other because they're so busy on their phone. Well, this is an opportunity to embrace technology and talk to someone. I think that's where we need to concentrate a lot with our businesses and our personal relationships, is how do you just reach out to someone and chat? Why does it have to be about business? Why does it have to be about profit? Why doesn't it just be about community and keeping each other in a sane state as we move forward through this? And our businesses are going to be what they're going to be. We can drive it if we want, but let's keep our community intact. Let's keep this whole society moving for our kids and our next generation, because it's not over. We're just going through this weird, tough season. And I am 100% confident that we're going to look back a couple of months from now and go, whew, we dodged a bullet. But let's take that information and help the next generation use it correctly and appropriately.
I'm so busy listening, I forgot to unmute myself. Thank you very much. I appreciate you ending us on that. Tom, just as an FYI, this coffee house will be open till about 9. And so if you're, so when Doug leaves, we're not gone. We're still sitting here chit-chatting and talking. Joe is in Cedar Rapids. We're talking to her. So we'll still continue to have. So Doug, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
All right. We'll see you guys on Friday, 7 o'clock. More coffee.
More coffee.
All right. Spread the word.
Take care, Doug. Thanks.
Thank you. Guys, have a good day.
Thanks.
Thanks.
So Tom, Friday, our conversation is, Evan, what is our conversation Friday?
On Friday, we are focusing